All right, I want to call to order the special meeting of the Board of Education for Unit District 186. And Mrs. Hines, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bain.
Here.
Mr. Beavers.
Here.
Mrs. Brazel.
Here.
Mr. Green.
Here.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mrs. Evaldi.
Here.
Mr. Rungy.
Here. Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Mrs. Hines, would you please?
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the next item is the approval of the agenda. Dr. Evers, are there any additions or changes?
No, sir.
Then I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5 is the recognition of the audience. The Board of Education welcomes the audience to make public or employee comments. The board has set aside time in the agenda specifically for this purpose. Pursuant to Board Policy 2.230, each speaker shall be limited to a 5-minute presentation. Please be aware that while this is the time for the public to express its opinions and/or concerns, the board may or may not comment regarding public presentations. If a matter of public comment warrants discussion or action of the Board of Education, such discussion or action will be added to the agenda of a future meeting. Are there any public concerns? Are there any employee concerns? Then I thank you all for coming. We will move into new business, which is the approval of the Murphysboro Middle School wire refeed, which is enclosure number 1 in your packet. And this is an error, or not an error, but a situation that was uncovered.
Unearthed when they were doing the phase 3 of the project. There's some old wiring that needs to be refed and replaced. So this is the change that will, and the scope of the work that will need to be accomplished to safely have all the electrical upgrades made.
The cost of that is with Burke Electric and A&W Plumbing for a cost of $41,071.55. I'll open the floor to the board if there are any questions.
So do you know, was this ever mentioned during the pre-bid meeting?
No, and that was not publicly mentioned before, and when I asked if it was something that would have been within the scope that they could have seen, they said you would have had to have that through like a certified electricians go through and actually look for that, because even the project architects are not qualified to like go through and actually look for the electrical, like do the deep dig. And so when it was unearthed, it was not something foreseeable, because I had that question from another board member and talked to our PA, Mr. Seifert, and he said, they couldn't have unearthed it unless we had done a study beforehand and to utilize the right like teams to look at it.
So if we had a mechanical engineer on site instead of in Nashville, Tennessee, would that have been something that they could have found?
I do not believe so.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board?
What is the issue? Sorry, what is the issue with the stability of current wiring?
It's just in one section there was, you know where it is, and I'm going to describe it a little bit better.
Whenever they had to tap in with some of the new circuits into the same junction boxes, they opened the junction box up, and all of the large feeder wires to the entire west end were extremely brittle. The casing and everything was falling off of it.
How old was it?
How old was it? That west end was built, I believe, in the 50s, so
Okay.
we're probably looking at mid-50s.
So we got our.
Because this was the original feeder wire on it.
Yes. When they showed it to me last week, when I was like, can you show me where the refeed will be? And I was like, it didn't take even a soft touch to it. I was like, yeah, it's really old wiring. It had that brittle cloth look.
It's definitely gotten hot and been under too much of a load over some time, so it's time.
Still okay on timeline?
Yes.
Other questions from the board? I'll entertain a motion to approve the rewire at the middle school.
So moved.
In a second,
Second.
Mrs. Hines.
Mr. Bain.
Yes.
Mrs. Brazel.
Yes.
Mr. Beavers.
Yes.
Mr. Green.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mrs. Evaldi.
Yes.
Mr. Rungy.
Yes, motion carries. Item number 2 is the pause of evaluations for all certified and non-certified employees. And Dr. Evers, I'm assuming that because of where we are now, we're
Correct.
going to do this just exactly like we did a year ago.
Exactly, just a repeat of just pausing for one more year and doing more of an informal evaluation of all certified and non-certified employees, just walk through.
MEA is fine with that too?
What's that?
MEA
Yes.
is fine with that as well.
Is this a recommendation from the state, or is this
It's
just?
kind of what most people are looking at as best practice as we, navigate through.
Okay.
And when you look at an evaluation cycle, it's usually staggered, that you have the student growth and then the observation measures as year 1 and 2. It will get us resynced back to where if we do a 2, if we would have done a 1 year, we would have been a little out of sync with the process because it's a 2-year loop before you loop back in. So we'll essentially start next year where we left off 2 years ago.
We hope.
How does
On
this-
evaluations.
How does this change tenure?
It doesn't. I mean, we had the ability there, if a principal brings a recommendation for non-renewal, we still have the same scope and ability. That was one of the discussions that we had with the district attorney about if we pause for, temporarily or throughout the, pandemic, could we still release a non-tenured teacher who is underperforming, and there's no issue with that. We actually did it. Well, I mean, you can get resignation or you can go through the process, so no problems with that either.
Could a teacher potentially make tenure during this
Potentially.
time?
Potentially, but again, you have to have that vigilance from the building level administrator to still stay present in those classrooms, so.
So that part doesn't pause?
No.
I believe the way the language read was if you get your previous evaluation, so if the teacher was distinguished before the pandemic, they're still rated as distinguished during this time. If they've never been rated before, they still receive a proficient.
The default to proficient.
Other questions? Then I'll entertain a motion to approve the pause of evaluations for all certified and non-certified employees.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Mrs. Hines?
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Brazel?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Boehm?
Yes.
Mrs. Evaldi?
Yes.
Mr. Beavers?
Yes.
Mr. Rungy?
Yes, motion carries, and we have a need to go into closed session.
I make a motion to go into closed session pursuant to Section 2 of the Open Meetings Act 5, Illinois Compiled Statutes 120/2C, to consider the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district, and 2, collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees.
And I'll entertain a second.
Second.
Mrs. Hines?
Mr. Beavers?
Yes.
Mrs. Evaldi?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Boehm?
Yes.
Mrs. Brazel?
Yes.
Mr. Rungy?
Yes, motion carries. All right, folks, we'll see you in a few minutes.